The classroom buzzes with the quiet energy of anticipation as the teacher steps to the front, a warm smile on their face. The students, eager and attentive, lean in, ready for the day's lesson. The teacher takes a moment to survey the room, letting the silence settle before asking a question that immediately captivates everyone's attention. Have you ever wondered, the teacher begins, why people have always searched for something greater than themselves? Why do we look up at the stars and feel a longing for something more, something beyond what we can see or touch? Why do we ask if God exists? The students exchange curious glances, some nodding thoughtfully, others raising eyebrows in intrigue. You see, the teacher continues, pacing slowly, this question, does God exist? Isn't just about God. It's about us. It's about our deepest desires to understand the universe and our place within it. From ancient times, humans have asked this question, and it has shaped countless philosophies, religions, and ways of thinking. But what are we really asking when we wonder about the existence of a higher power? A student raises a hand tentatively. Are we asking if there's a purpose to everything? Exactly. The teacher responds enthusiastically. Purpose, meaning, direction, these are all part of the mystery we're trying to unravel. But today, I want to take you on a journey into how this question has been approached by one of the greatest minds in history, the Buddha. His responses to this question weren't straightforward. They were, in fact, quite unique and tailored to the individuals asking them. The teacher pauses, letting the words sink in. Imagine this, the teacher says, their voice growing softer, drawing the students in. A man walks up to the Buddha and asks him directly, does God exist? The Buddha looks at him with calm eyes and says, the students lean forward, hanging on every word, but before we dive into the Buddha's answer, the teacher adds, a twinkle in their eye, I want you to think about something. What would you say if someone asked you if God exists? Would you say yes? No? Or maybe something else entirely? The room fills with thoughtful silence as the students ponder the question. The teacher smiles, knowing they have ignited the spark of curiosity, setting the stage for a deep exploration of one of life's most profound mysteries. Let's explore together, the teacher continues. Let's see what we can learn from the Buddha's unique approach to this timeless question. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find some answers for ourselves along the way. Does God exist? Ah, what a question. This isn't just a query, it's a quest, a journey into the very heart of our existence. From the ancient Greeks, like Plato and Aristotle, to the sages of India and the mythmakers of Mesopotamia, people have always wondered about a higher power. And why, you may ask? Why does this question grip our hearts and minds so tightly? The teacher pauses, allowing the question to hang in the air, drawing the students into the mystery. It's because, my dear students, the teacher continues, this question isn't just about the existence of a deity. It's about our search for meaning, our desire to understand the universe and our place within it. Think about it for a moment. When we ask, does God exist? Are we talking about a specific deity like Yahweh, Allah, Zeus, or Vishnu? Or are we speaking of something more abstract, a supreme being, an ultimate reality that underlies all existence? The answer isn't straightforward, is it? A few students nod, intrigued by the complexity of the question. You see, the teacher adds, this question is deeply personal. It's shaped by our cultures, our histories, and our personal beliefs. Even today, in our world of scientific discoveries and technological advancements, this question remains ever relevant. Science and religion both seek to explain the mysteries of existence, but they do so in different ways. Science uses empirical observations and natural laws, while religion appeals to faith, spirituality, and the belief in something greater than ourselves. How do we make sense of this? How do we balance what we can measure and see with what we feel in our hearts? The teacher leans in, eyes scanning the room, making each student feel the importance of the question. And this is where the Buddha's teachings come in, the teacher says with a knowing smile. The Buddha had a unique perspective on the question of God's existence. He didn't just give one answer, he gave multiple answers, each one tailored to the person asking. Let me tell you a story of 3 encounters that reveal the Buddha's wisdom. The student's eyes widen with interest. Eager to hear more, in the first encounter, the teacher begins. A man approaches the Buddha and asks him directly, "Does God exist?" Now, imagine the surprise when the Buddha responds with a clear and firm yes. Can you believe it? This answer shocks everyone, especially Ananda, the Buddha's closest disciple and cousin. Ananda is confused because the Buddha has always emphasized teachings that focus on personal responsibility, ethical conduct, and mental discipline, rather than the worship of a deity. So why, Ananda wonders, did the Buddha say yes? The teacher looks around the room, noticing the students' puzzled expressions. But here's the twist, the teacher says with a chuckle. The Buddha was not affirming a particular concept of God. No. He sensed that the man who asked the question was a staunch atheist, someone who firmly believed there was no God and dismissed all religious beliefs as mere superstition. The Buddha, always the skillful teacher, saw that this man's disbelief was just as rigid and dogmatic as the beliefs he criticized. So, by answering yes, the Buddha wasn't supporting the idea of God. Instead, he was challenging the man's closed-mindedness, pushing him to question his own assumptions. Isn't that fascinating? The Buddha was using his answer as a tool to provoke deeper reflection. The students murmur among themselves, some nodding. Others clearly deep in thought, but wait, the teacher continues, the story doesn't end there. Later that same day, another person comes to the Buddha with the same question, does God exist? And this time, the Buddha says, no, what? How could he give the opposite answer just hours apart? Ananda, who has been listening all along, is now even more perplexed. Why would the Buddha contradict himself? A student raises a hand. Was it because the second person needed a different lesson? Exactly. The teacher exclaims, pointing to the student with a smile. The second seeker was a devout believer, someone who needed reassurance that his faith in God was justified. He was looking for validation. For the Buddha to tell him that his beliefs were correct. But the Buddha, recognizing this dependency on external validation, chose to say no. He wanted to free this man from his attachment to needing constant reassurance about his beliefs. The Buddha's no was not a denial of a higher reality but a way to encourage the seeker to look beyond his need for validation and to cultivate a more direct and personal understanding of truth. Can you see how the Buddha used different answers to guide each person according to their needs? The room is filled with nods, some students taking notes furiously, others still pondering the implications of the Buddha's responses, and then, the teacher says softly. There was a third encounter. This time, a seeker approached the Buddha and asked, "Can you tell me about God?" But the Buddha did not respond with words. Instead, he closed his eyes and sat in silence. The seeker, noticing the Buddha's silent meditation, also closed his eyes and joined him in silence. They sat together like this for half an hour. No words, just silence. And after this period of deep meditation, the seeker bowed to the Buddha, expressing his profound gratitude. Now, what do you think this silence meant? The room falls into its own kind of silence, mirroring the story. A student finally speaks up, was the Buddha showing that some truths are beyond words? Exactly. The teacher responds with a gentle nod. The Buddha's silence was a profound teaching. Sometimes, words and concepts can't capture the truth we seek. The Buddha was guiding the seeker to understand that the ultimate truth, the nature of reality, can't always be explained with words. It's something to be experienced directly, beyond thoughts and language. Isn't that a powerful lesson? Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. The students are visibly moved, some closing their eyes as if to feel the silence themselves. After all these encounters, the teacher continues, Ananda, who has been observing everything, is full of questions. He approaches the Buddha with his confusion. Master, he asks, I heard you say yes, then no, and then you were silent. How can these be reconciled? And do you know what the Buddha said? The students lean in, eager for the answer. The Buddha, with great patience and compassion, explains to Ananda, each answer was given according to the needs of the person asking. The truth isn't something that can be pinned down with a single word or concept. It is vast, beyond the grasp of the intellect. Each answer I gave was meant to guide each person toward a deeper understanding of themselves and the nature of reality. The teacher looks around the room, seeing the impact of these words on the students. Do you see now, my dear students? The teacher asks. The Buddha's teachings are not about giving definitive answers to every question but about encouraging us to cultivate wisdom, compassion, and insight. He used different answers as tools, each one a skillful means to help the seeker progress on their spiritual journey. This is a reminder that our path to understanding isn't about finding all the answers but about asking the right questions and being open to the journey itself. The students nod, some smiling, others deep in contemplation. Now, let's consider something else, the teacher continues, shifting slightly. Let's talk about the nature of God. If God exists, what kind of being is he? Is God a personal deity who created the universe and continues to intervene in its affairs, as many religious traditions suggest? Or is God an impersonal force, a fundamental principle that underlies all of existence, as some philosophical and mystical traditions propose? A student raises a hand. Isn't it possible that the concept of God is just a projection of our desires and fears? Ah, yes, the teacher replies, nodding thoughtfully. That is a very insightful question. Some thinkers, like Sigmund Freud, have indeed suggested that God could be a psychological construct, a father figure who provides comfort in a chaotic world. This perspective raises another question. If God is merely a human invention, why do beliefs in God persist across so many cultures and epochs? Why do so many people continue to find solace and meaning in the idea of a higher power, even in the face of contrary evidence? Could it be that this concept points to something deeper, something that resonates with a truth beyond the material world? The students listen intently, some nodding in agreement, others pondering the complexities of the question. Now, let's shift our focus a little, the teacher continues. Consider the role of God in shaping human morality and ethics. In many traditions, God is not just a creator but also a moral authority, the ultimate judge of right and wrong. This view has had a profound impact on human behavior and social organization. But is the belief in a divine lawgiver necessary for morality? Can humans be moral without the belief in a divine command? Another student raises a hand. Couldn't morality be based on empathy and social contracts instead? Absolutely. The teacher exclaims. Many argue that morality is a human construct, rooted in our social nature and our capacity for empathy and reason. The Buddha himself didn't base his ethical teachings on the authority of a deity. Instead, he emphasized personal responsibility, mindfulness, and compassion. For the Buddha, morality wasn't about obeying divine commands but understanding the causes of suffering and cultivating qualities that lead to liberation. The students are visibly engaged, some nodding along, others jotting down notes. And let's not forget, the teacher adds, the role of faith and belief in spiritual development. In many traditions, faith in God is seen as essential. But faith can also lead to dogmatism if it becomes rigid and unexamined. The Buddha's approach to faith was more balanced. He recognized that faith could be valuable, but he also emphasized the importance of direct experience and inquiry. He encouraged his followers not to accept his teachings blindly but to test them in their own lives. This approach reflects a deeper understanding of faith, not as an end in itself, but as a tool for cultivating insight and awakening. The students sit back, reflecting on the teacher's words. And finally, the teacher concludes, let's return to the story of Ananda, the Buddha's loyal disciple. Ananda had a unique relationship with the Buddha, filled with both challenges and profound lessons. He served as the Buddha's personal attendant for 25 years, witnessing firsthand the depth of the Buddha's wisdom and compassion. Yet, despite his close relationship with the Buddha, Ananda struggled to achieve enlightenment during the Buddha's lifetime. It was only after the Buddha's passing that Ananda, through deep introspection and dedicated practice, finally attained liberation. Ananda's journey teaches us that even those closest to wisdom can face obstacles. But with perseverance and sincere effort, liberation is possible. The teacher's voice softens, filled with compassion. So, my dear students, remember this: the path to understanding is not about having all the answers. It's about being open to the questions, embracing the journey, and being willing to transform ourselves. The Buddha's teachings guide us to cultivate a mind free from attachment, a heart full of compassion, and a spirit dedicated to truth and wisdom. And with that, you will move closer to understanding the true nature of reality and realizing your own potential for awakening. The room is filled with a profound silence, the kind that comes from deep reflection and newfound understanding. Each student, lost in thought, is left to ponder their own spiritual journey and the timeless questions that continue to shape the human experience. As the lesson draws to a close, the classroom is filled with a contemplative silence. The students are deep in thought, reflecting on the journey they have taken through the Buddha's teachings and the profound question of God's existence. The teacher, noticing the thoughtful expressions on their faces, steps forward once again, ready to bring the discussion to a close. The teacher gently breaks the silence, saying, "So, we've journeyed together today through some of the most profound questions humanity has ever asked. We've seen how the Buddha, with his wisdom and insight, approached the question of God's existence not with simple answers, but with responses that were tailored to each seeker's needs. We've explored how his yes, no, and silence were not contradictions, but rather a deep understanding that truth is not one size fits all." The teacher pauses, letting the weight of the lesson settle in. "But now, my dear students," the teacher continues, "I want to return to the question I asked you at the beginning. What would you say if someone asked you if God exists? Have your thoughts changed after hearing the Buddha's approach? Do you see how the answer might depend on who is asking and why they are asking? How it might depend on what they need to hear in that moment?" A few students nod, others look contemplative. One student raises a hand and asks, "Does that mean there isn't one true answer? Then? That it's all about perspective?" The teacher smiles warmly, appreciating the depth of the question. "That's a very insightful observation." The Buddha's approach teaches us that sometimes the answers we seek are not about the right or wrong answer in the traditional sense. Instead, it's about what helps us grow, what challenges us, and what brings us closer to understanding the nature of reality. It's about finding our own path to wisdom, compassion, and truth. The teacher looks around the room, seeing the students' eager faces, and continues, "And that's what I want you to take away from today's discussion. The question of God's existence is just one of many profound questions you will encounter in life. But like the Buddha, approach these questions with an open heart and mind. Understand that the journey to the answer is often more important than the answer itself." A sense of calm and clarity fills the room as the teacher concludes, "Remember, life isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and being open to the possibilities that those questions reveal. And with that mindset, you can explore the mysteries of existence, just as the Buddha's followers did thousands of years ago, and just as people continue to do today." The students seem to relax, taking in the wisdom of the words. Some smile, others nod in agreement, feeling a sense of closure and newfound perspective. "So," the teacher says with a final smile, "as you leave today, carry these thoughts with you. Reflect on them. Discuss them with each other. Let them challenge you and guide you in your own journey of discovery. And always remember, the quest for understanding is never-ending and ever-deepening. It's the journey that matters most." With these words, the teacher steps back, and the classroom fills with a gentle murmur of conversation as the students begin to gather their things. There's a sense of calm excitement in the air, a shared understanding that they've just touched on something profound. The teacher watches them with a smile, knowing that this is just the beginning of their own personal explorations into life's greatest mysteries.